Unveiling the secret, why Sagittarius is called the most dangerous zodiac sign in the world. There is a secret no one tells you. Not because they don't know it, but because they're afraid that light will expose what they've tried to hide their entire lives. Among the 12 zodiac signs, not everyone comes to keep the peace. Not everyone is born to please others. Some souls are born to pierce illusions, to sound the alarm, even when the world isn't ready to listen. And Sagittarius is one of them. Not loud. Not disruptive. But when they show up, everything starts to shift. You might have thought the most dangerous zodiac sign was Scorpio, with their deep and mysterious intensity. Or maybe Capricorn, with their cold gaze and silent authority. But truth doesn't always lie in appearances. It lies in those seemingly harmless souls, who carry an arrow that never turns back. And Sagittarius is exactly that. The one who doesn't need to threaten anyone, yet makes it impossible for others to keep pretending. They don't unmask you outright, but their very presence makes it impossible for you to continue playing your own role. They don't seek war, yet they awaken revolutions from deep within the souls of those who have been asleep. You might ignore their gaze. You might not believe their words. But you cannot deny that, after meeting a Sagittarius, you are no longer the same. In the next 30 minutes, I will take you deep into the soul of one of the most misunderstood signs. So you can understand why Sagittarius is called the most dangerous sign in the world. Not because they hurt others, but because they will not let you keep hurting yourself. This is not just an astrological story. This is a journey into a type of energy that can change destiny itself. And if you're listening to this, maybe it's because you carry a part of that energy within you. Maybe you are a Sagittarius. Or maybe, life placed a Sagittarius on your path so that you would learn to face the truth. Write the words, "I am ready to awaken my divine purpose." Because that comment is not just a statement, it is a way of connecting to the universal energy that is quietly guiding you. And if what you are about to hear moves you, share this video. Spread this light to those who need it. Because sometimes, a small truth, spoken at the right time, can light up an entire lifetime. Are you ready? Unveil the secret with me, and step into the light you've always carried in your heart, but never dared to name. I have lived long enough to understand that the most dangerous people are not those who carry weapons, but those who carry truth. And no one holds that truth quite like Sagittarius. They don't need to prove anything. They don't need to raise their voice. Just one look, one sentence, one presence, is enough to make others look back at themselves. And for a world that has grown far too comfortable with avoidance, that is not easy to accept. I once met a Sagittarius woman on a very quiet winter day. She didn't speak much, but every word she said was like an arrow, piercing through the defenses of the person in front of her. Not to wound, but to awaken. To strip away the masks we've worn for years, for lifetimes. What I saw in her, and only later could name, was the courage to live truthfully. And from that day, I knew, there is nothing more dangerous than someone who is no longer afraid to lose. That is the lesson the universe whispers through Sagittarius. That true freedom is not about how far you go, but about who you dare to be when everything has been taken from you. To stand tall when someone tries to make you bow. To live truthfully when the world demands you fake it. Sagittarius is the reminder that truth does not need to be dressed up. It only needs to be lived. And if you've ever felt lost in this world, if you've ever thought you were too blunt, too sensitive, too different to be loved, maybe you're not wrong. Maybe you're just living too truthfully in a world that isn't ready for that truth. And that is why you were born a Sagittarius. Or why a Sagittarius has entered your life. Don't see it as coincidence. It is a calling. It is a signal from a higher level of the soul, saying, it is time for you to stop sleeping in the old version of yourself. If you're still here at this moment, then admit this to yourself. I am ready to live so truthfully that the universe has no choice but to respond. Because only when you say that, the energy within you truly begins to shift. And then, everything that no longer belongs will fall away. And what is meant for you will find its way to you. Let that statement be a vow to your soul. And if something in your heart is stirring, share this video as a way to send out a signal to other souls also needing a touch of awakening. Because the world doesn't need more pretending. The world needs more people brave enough to become who they really are. And you may be one of them. They say the most formidable people are those who have nothing left to lose. But I believe something deeper, the most formidable ones are those who never allow themselves to be owned. And Sagittarius is that kind of soul. They love freedom as if it's the last oxygen left on Earth. You cannot force a Sagittarius to stay if their heart is being called toward another horizon. But if they stay, it's because they choose you. Because you are worthy. And that is what makes them special. Dangerous, not because they leave. But because they force you to learn how to hold without controlling. To love without possessing. To walk beside without limiting. I once witnessed a Sagittarius man walk away from a stable job. A peaceful family. A city where everyone knew his name, just to follow an inner calling. They called it madness. But 10 years later, he came back, not only successful in wealth, but with a light in his eyes, something he never had before. He didn't lose anything. He just refused to trade his soul for temporary security. And maybe, that is what makes the world fear a Sagittarius. Because they live by the truth within, not the expectations of others. If you've ever had to choose between safety and truth, remember this lesson. Because Sagittarius will always choose truth, even if it means losing everything. But in the end, it is that choice that leads them to everything. Write down, I choose to live truthfully, even when the world doesn't understand me. Because that is not just a sentence, it is a soul declaration. And sometimes, all it takes is your willingness to say it, for the door of your life to open in an entirely new way. You know, I believe that everyone carries a sacred fire, but with Sagittarius, that fire doesn't just burn within. It walks with them. It enters the room before they even speak. Sagittarius doesn't need to say much, because the energy they carry is already a story. They can make you feel warm, while also making it impossible for you to avoid yourself. And that makes them dangerous in the eyes of those who live in pretense. I once sat in a gathering where everyone tried to say the acceptable thing. Only one Sagittarius woman spoke up, telling a truth that everyone else had been avoiding. The room went silent. No one responded. But afterward, one by one, people came to her, because her courage opened a door they had never dared to open themselves. Truth is not easy to hear. But it sets you free. And Sagittarius, they are born to liberate. If you have ever been the only one who dared to speak the truth in a silent crowd, write this down, I am the voice of truth. Because every time you say it, you're holding onto a light that the world needs now more than ever. And finally, perhaps the most dangerous thing about a Sagittarius is not the truth they speak, but how they make you remember who you really are. In a world full of noise, they are the silence that makes you suddenly ask, how far? Have I strayed from myself? And then, like a bell, like a breeze, like an arrow, they bring you back. Maybe you've forgotten the voice inside yourself. Maybe you've lived too long for others. But if today, a part of you stirred when you heard these words, then please, don't ignore it. That is not a passing feeling. That is your soul speaking. Write down, I am returning to myself. And share this video, not for me, but for someone else out there, who also needs to hear what you just heard. We are all messengers for one another. And sometimes, just one word, one gaze, one recording, can change the destiny of a soul longing to come home. I used to think that the one who brings change is the strongest person. But the longer I live, the more I realize the one who dares to lose their beautiful image to keep their truth is the one most worthy of respect. That's what Sagittarius is. They were not born to be the good person in everyone's eyes. They were born to be the real one. And sometimes, that realness frightens others. They're afraid of being mirrored. Afraid of being seen. Afraid of admitting the parts of themselves that are still incomplete. The world may love Sagittarius when they're cheerful, humorous, free-spirited. But the world shrinks back and avoids them when Sagittarius begins to say what no one dares to say. Because in that moment, they are no longer the funny one. They become the one who shines a light on the falsehoods others carry in their minds. And truth, like a sweet blade, slices through the masks we once believed were skin. I remember once trying to maintain a relationship that my heart already knew was no longer real. But I didn't have the courage to leave. Until one day, a Sagittarius friend looked me straight in the eye and asked, "What are you living for? False peace, or a truth that lets you finally breathe again?" That question hurt. But from that pain, I began to live again. That is what Sagittarius does. They make you hurt, not to bleed, but to heal, at the deepest level of your soul. If you have ever had a moment like that, when a truth woke you up, write down, "I choose the truth, even if it costs me everything." Because real loss is not losing someone else. It's losing yourself by living in what is not true. And if today, something in your heart is touched by these words, then maybe your soul is waking up. I have seen many people try to stay away from those like Sagittarius. They say Sagittarius is hard to control, hot-tempered, defiant. But the deeper I go into life, the more I understand, the world fears what it cannot control. And Sagittarius is that. You cannot hold them down. You cannot tie them up with rules, roles, or obligations. Because when they feel their soul being suffocated, they will cut the rope and fly. That hurts people. But if you are mature enough, you will understand it is not selfishness. It is an act of the soul. They don't leave to abandon you. They leave to protect the fragile flame inside, one that, if they stayed, would be extinguished by expectations and falseness. And the beautiful thing is, when that light becomes strong enough, they come back. Not because you need them, but because they know they were born to lead the way. I once spent a long time living in a role others placed upon me, doing the things others expected. And I lost joy. I lost meaning. I lost my sacred connection to myself. Until one day, I heard a sentence from an older Sagittarius. Don't live as a copy. Live as the original the universe created with such care. That sentence changed my life. And from that day forward, I was no longer afraid to walk alone. Because I knew, the path my soul called me toward, always leads to true peace. If you have ever lived according to others' expectations, and forgotten the voice within yourself, then leave this sacred vow, I am ready to return to who I truly am. And if you feel this video has touched something in your heart, share it. Not because it's perfect, but because somewhere out there, someone is desperately waiting for a message like this to remember they still have value. I used to think I understood Sagittarius, until I actually stepped into their energy, where light is no longer just a poetic symbol, but a sacred commitment. You cannot be close to a Sagittarius and still live in pretense. You cannot cling to fear and hope they will soothe you with sweet lies. They will look at you, deeply, as if seeing through your skin and your masks, and name the truth that even you haven't dared to admit to yourself. That is why many people cannot stay long in the presence of a Sagittarius. Not because they don't love you, but because the truth they carry is so strong, only souls ready to awaken can bear it. For me, it was a challenge. And also a blessing. I remember one winter afternoon. I was sitting with a Sagittarius friend. I told her about old wounds, things I thought I had already forgotten. She didn't comfort me. She didn't promise everything would be okay. She just asked, "So in the end, do you want to keep holding the pain, or do you want to live?" I was silent. Because I knew there was no more space for excuses. That question, like a door flung open inside me. And I understood. That's how Sagittarius heals, not with sedatives, but with truth. And from that moment, I realized something profound. No one can lead you back to yourself faster than a Sagittarius. They don't lift you with compliments, they lift you with light. Light that forces you to see the corners you've denied for too long. But only when you face those shadows can you discover your most radiant self. If you've ever had someone make you look at yourself, not with criticism, but with the honesty of their presence, it's very likely that person was a Sagittarius. They don't come to be loved by you. They come to awaken the part of you that you forgot. And that is what makes them dangerous to souls not yet ready to change. Write this down. I am ready to face myself, no more avoidance. Because sometimes, that one admission opens the door to a new chapter in your life. A chapter where you no longer have to live to please anyone else. I once asked a Sagittarius, "Do you ever feel lonely?" She smiled gently. Then said, "Yes, a lot. But loneliness is not my enemy. It's where I hear the most sacred calling of my soul." That answer left me quiet for a long time. Because for so many years, I had been running from loneliness, stuffing my life with work, relationships, social media, just to avoid hearing that small voice inside. But Sagittarius doesn't run from it. They sit with it. They listen. And they let loneliness become a companion, not to escape the world, but to understand more clearly the purpose they were sent here for. I started learning that from them. I practiced being silent. I practiced looking straight into the parts one had once avoided. And in that silence, I found the peace of my soul I had long forgotten. Sagittarius doesn't teach you how to live to please others. They teach you how to live so that your soul can smile. And that lesson, for me, is worth more than any lecture I've ever heard. If you have ever felt lonely in a crowd, but still held onto your light, write this down. I choose to walk alone. As long as I don't lose myself. Because true light never comes from the crowd. It comes from those who dare to stay with themselves, in the dark. There is something strange yet true, even though the world may reject Sagittarius when they live authentically. It's those same people who come back to them when the storm of life arrives. Because everyone knows, when no one else dares to speak the truth, Sagittarius still will. Even if it means being misunderstood. Even if it means being left behind. They still choose truth. They choose soul over image. And that is the beautiful kind of danger they bring. I once heard a Sagittarius. Not because I was cruel, but because I didn't have enough courage to face the truth they carried. But when I returned to apologize, that person didn't blame me. Didn't list my wrongs. Didn't hold on to resentment. They simply said, "I knew you'd come back. When you're strong enough to see what you couldn't see back then." I cried. Because I understood, the greatest form of forgiveness doesn't come from erasing mistakes. It comes from embracing the growth of a soul. And Sagittarius, they always welcome that. If you've ever gone back to someone, not to start over, but to speak a truth from the depths of your heart, write this down. I am grateful I was strong enough to face what once scared me. Because sometimes, success isn't the proof of growth. The real proof is having the courage to look back, apologize, forgive, and move forward, like a soul that has truly matured. Sagittarius was not born to please everyone. They were born to be a mirror for the soul. So that anyone who looks at them must ask themselves, am I living truthfully? They are not perfect. But they are honest. And in a world full of polished masks, that honesty is dangerous. Like a spear of light piercing through every layer of disguise. No one likes to be exposed. But everyone needs it, to truly live. You don't have to be a Sagittarius to carry that light within you. You just have to live with a heart that's no longer dimmed by fear. You just have to dare to speak what is right, even if your hands tremble. You just have to dare to rise, even when your legs are tired, and say, I am myself. And that is enough. In that moment, you're no longer living as a person. You're living as a soul that has awakened. Write this final affirmation in this section. I am ready to live as an awakened soul, without needing anyone's permission. And if you know someone who needs a light like this, don't hesitate to send them this video. Because maybe you'll be the reason they step out of the darkness and begin their journey back home to themselves. There's something not everyone understands. The true power of Sagittarius doesn't lie in how fast they move, or how optimistic they appear. It lies in their unshakable belief. The belief that this life carries a meaning deeper than what the eye can see. The belief that everything happens for a reason, and that truth, no matter how brutal, is still better than living inside a velvet box of sweet deception. I used to be someone who doubted it. I used to think, faith can't feed a person. It's just spiritual comfort. But then, in a great turning point in my life, when everything I had believed in collapsed, when the people I once called friends turned away, and when I no longer knew who I was, I met a Sagittarius man. Not because he came to save me, but because he came as a mirror, reflecting the part of me I had lost. He didn't ask me what I had lost. He only asked, so now, what do you still have to rebuild from? And I began listing the little things still left in my life: fragile faith, a faint intuition, and a silent longing that had never died. He nodded. Then said something I will never forget. That is enough. Because God doesn't need you to be strong. He just needs you to be honest. That sentence was like holy water washing over my soul. Because I realized, Sagittarius doesn't live by certainty. They live by faith. Not blind faith, but a deep, ancient knowing. As if their soul had walked through other worlds and returned to tell us something we've long forgotten. And then I understood why Jupiter, the planet that rules Sagittarius, is not a gentle star. It is the planet of expansion. Expanding all that is good, and also all that must be faced in order to grow. Someone with strong Sagittarius energy is always pushed out of their comfort zone. They cannot hide in false relationships. They cannot stay in jobs that no longer carry meaning. They are cast into the desert, not to be punished, but to be reborn. And if you are in a season where everything feels like it's falling apart, leave this comment. I am being expanded, not broken. Because sometimes, you think God is taking everything away from you. But in truth, He's just clearing the path for something greater. Something you never dared to dream of. I clearly remember one night, standing in front of the mirror after a day full of wounds. I had lost what I once believed was everything. My job. The one I loved. My faith in myself. But then, in a very quiet moment, I whispered through tears. But I still have me. And the reflection in the mirror was no longer that of a victim, but of a soul beginning to remember its true strength. That was when I understood Sagittarius's greatest lesson. You don't need to hold on to what has already died, just because you're afraid of being alone. Because when you release what no longer lives, you create space for true life to enter. And that is what Sagittarius often forces you to learn, by leaving, by refusing to compromise. By living so truthfully it makes you uncomfortable. But if you're brave enough to stay with that discomfort, you will change. Not into someone else, but into yourself, original, strong, radiant, and no longer needing approval to feel enough. If you've ever been afraid of loss, but still chose to let go, leave this vow. I do not cling to the dark just because it's familiar. Because familiar darkness will never lead you to true light. And you are worthy of the light. You have always been worthy. I once witnessed a Sagittarius woman give up everything to start over at the age of 50. She had been a teacher, had a stable life, a marriage that lasted 3 decades. But she felt herself dying slowly inside that very life. And when her soul spoke up, she didn't turn away. She walked. She went back to school, fell in love again, rewrote every chapter of her life, not for anyone else. But because she knew, if I don't live truthfully now, then when? When I asked her if she was afraid, she just smiled and said, I am. But I'm more afraid of living my whole life without ever having been myself. If you're standing at the edge of change, write down this sentence. I don't need certainty, I just need honesty. And if something in this touched the deepest part of you, please share it. Not to promote anyone's name, but to spread the light. And maybe, save a soul standing in the same place where you once stood. I once asked an elder astrologer, out of the 12 zodiac signs, who is the one the universe fears the most? He didn't hesitate. He looked me straight in the eye, with a gaze both kind and solemn, and said, Sagittarius. Not because they're great fighters, but because they fight with faith. That answer left me silent for a long time. Because I used to think the strongest ones were those with power, wealth, and strategy. But then I began to understand. In this world, what frightens the dark forces the most is not money or muscle, but someone who carries a flame that cannot be put out, the flame of truth and freedom. And Sagittarius carries that flame, even when it burns what they love the most. There's a beautiful detail in astrology many people overlook. The 9th house, the house of philosophy, spirituality, truth, and awakening, is the soul's home for Sagittarius. This means people born under this sign come to lead humanity beyond the ego, beyond small fears, into a greater space, where the soul is liberated and truth is named. They are not easy friends. They are not sweet lovers. They are not easily molded to society's expectations. But if you're ready to live truthfully, you'll realize. Being beside a Sagittarius is standing at the gate of liberation. I once worked with a Sagittarius subordinate. She wasn't good at obeying rigid rules. She questioned, she broke the mold, she spoke truths that made others uncomfortable. But she was the only one brave enough to speak out about an injustice happening in the organization, when no one else dared. She accepted being reprimanded. Accepted losing her chance to be promoted. But what she kept was the integrity of her conscience. Later, when everything was exposed, many came to thank her. But what moved me was this. She never did it for praise. She did it because, if she hadn't spoken, she wouldn't have been able to look in the mirror each morning and feel that she was truly alive. The greatest lesson I learned from her, and from all the Sagittarians who've passed through my life, is this. Conscience is not a choice. It is the foundation that keeps the soul from cracking. And if you've ever kept silent just to keep the peace, you know what that feels like. But if you've ever dared to speak what's right, even with trembling hands and a shaky voice, you also know that those moments saved your soul. Write this down. I choose integrity, even if it means I stand alone. Because sometimes, just one soul choosing to stand upright in the storm is enough to shift the course of a generation. One more thing I want to share, not just as a writer, but as someone who has walked through darkness. Sagittarius doesn't come to make your life easier. They come to make your life real. They won't soothe your weakness. They won't justify the fears you tightly hold. They will ask, Are you living, or just existing? And right then, you will hear your heart answer, with a raw honesty that chills you. And if you're brave enough not to run from that question, you will begin to change. Not with a grand explosion, but with a slow, steady awakening that cannot be reversed. I once studied the birth chart of a Sagittarius woman with her sun in the 12th house. The house of the subconscious, fear, and the hidden soul. She had spent over 40 years fulfilling her duties as a mother, a wife, a model citizen. But inside her was always a small voice, whispering that life must have something deeper, something more real. One very ordinary morning, she saw sunlight coming through her window, and she cried. Not because she was sad, but because she realized, how many years had it been since she last saw the light? Not the light of the sun, but the light of the soul. That day, she began journaling. She started meditating. She began asking questions she had never dared to ask. And a year later, she became a spiritual guide for other middle-aged women walking through the same awakening. That is what I love most about Sagittarius, they are never permanent victims of the dark. They always find a way through. And then, they return to show the path for others. Not to be praised. Not to be thanked. Because the nature of their soul is to lead with light. If you are in the middle of your rebirth, write this down. I will find the light, and I will bring it back. Because the world doesn't need more successful people. The world needs more who have been broken, who have fallen, who have lost it all, but still stand, with warm hearts and open hands. When you understand that, you will understand why Sagittarius is called the most dangerous zodiac sign. Not because they bring threat, but because they bring freedom. And that freedom makes others no longer able to hold on to them, unable to control. And that is what makes the world uneasy. There is nothing more dangerous than a free soul in a world that tries to keep everyone in a box. I used to think that one day in the future, when life was stable enough, when everything was in order, I would begin to live truthfully. But the farther I went, the more I realized, there is no someday that is perfect for you to live true to your soul. There is only now. This moment. As you are listening. As your heart slows down for something inside you that is awakening. And if you feel something is calling your name, please don't ignore it. That's what Sagittarius is. They don't give you time to delay. They come like a wind that blows apart everything you've neatly arranged. Not to destroy, but to help you realize, how long have you been holding on to things that are no longer you? How long have you lived by the blueprint others drew for you? How long have you stayed silent while your soul was screaming in the dark? How long have you sat still in the comfort zone and called it life? I've been there. And I know, truth hurts. But truth sets you free. It doesn't soothe. But it heals. Not with lullabies, but with awakening. And sometimes, the one who brings that awakening is a Sagittarius, a soul that cannot stand lies, cannot survive in chains, and cannot rest if their soul is still bound by fear. I remember a verse in the Bible, when God said to a trembling soul, "Do not be afraid, I am here." For me, every time a Sagittarius has appeared in my life, it is a form of that same sentence. A reminder that the light still exists. That the path still remains. And that your soul has never been forgotten. They are the ones who arrive, and are often misunderstood. Because this world is used to pretending. Used to sweet words. Used to compromise. But Sagittarius is non-compromise. They cannot stay where their soul is silenced. They cannot love you if you want them to be less of themselves. They cannot pretend to be fine, if they know that pretending is killing their inner light. And the frightening thing, also the most beautiful, is that they do not apologize for that. I learned one thing from them, and it is a lesson I want to pass on to you. Do not apologize for shining brighter than what others are used to. Do not shrink to fit an outdated version that society wants you to play. Do not stay silent just because your truth makes others uncomfortable. Because that is not your fault. Light does not need to be accepted. Light only needs to be lived. If you are standing at the crossroads between the old and the new, between fear and desire, between the familiar dark and the light you've never dared to enter, then I invite you to pause for a moment and listen. Not to me, but to yourself. Because the truth you're searching for out there is actually waiting for you inside. And if you feel something has awakened within, then right now, write down a declaration for yourself. It doesn't need to be poetic. It doesn't need to be trendy. It only needs to be true. Write down, I no longer ask for permission. I will live true to my soul, starting today. Because sometimes, you don't need a plan. You don't need anyone's approval. You just need a clear declaration to the universe, I am ready. And I believe, when you say that, the gate will open. Not loudly like a storm, but gently, like a door you never knew was waiting for you all along. You are a soul with a purpose. And if today you are hearing these words, it is no coincidence. You were led here to remember that you once carried light. And you still do. Even if life tried to make you forget. Hold on to that. Don't throw it away for anyone. Don't dim it because of any criticism. Guard that light like a sacred flame, and if someone is lost in the night, pass that light to them. Write down this final sentence in this section. I am the light this world is waiting for. And if you know someone walking through the dark as you once did, share this video. Not to be praised, but to send a signal. A reminder that they are not alone. That there are still those who live truthfully. Still those who walk in truth. Still those, like you, who light up the world by daring to be themselves. If you are still here, listening to this final moment, then I want you to know, this is not just a video. Not just a recording. This is a calling. A reminder. And also a door. That door does not open with applause or validation from others. It only opens when you dare to face yourself, dare to live truthfully, dare to say, I deserve a life that is not a performance. Throughout this journey, you have walked with me through the most powerful field of Sagittarius energy, the Zodiac born to awaken. To lead, to break barriers and open new horizons. You've heard about those who dare to stand alone, who speak what no one else will say, who love without control, who lose everything only to rediscover themselves. But perhaps, the most important thing you've heard, did not come from me. It came from you. From the sigh of relief when you realized, you are not alone. From the tears you couldn't hold back, because finally, someone said what you never had the words for. From the moment your heart began to beat again, not for anyone else, but because you remembered who you are. And if you are a Sagittarius, or carry Sagittarius energy in your birth chart, then please understand this. You are not a wandering soul. You are a messenger. A warrior of truth. A torch in the darkness of this age. And this world deeply needs you. And if you are not Sagittarius, but you feel your name was called in this journey, then maybe your soul is being touched by an energy you forgot long ago. And today, it just needed a single word to awaken. Then write down this sentence, as a commitment, a prayer, and a signal you send back to the universe. I will no longer live small. I am light, and I am ready to shine. And if any part of you found this journey meaningful, pass it on. Not as content to be shared, but as a flame to be handed forward. Send it to someone you love. Someone you see breaking. Someone you believe has light, but has forgotten it. Because sometimes, one sentence, one recording, one moment of silence, can save a soul standing on the edge of despair. I don't know your name. I don't know where you live. But if you're still here, I know one thing. You are the chosen one. And the light you carry inside is not meant to be kept. It is meant to lead. Thank you for walking with me all the way here. Thank you for having the courage to face the truth. And thank you for not abandoning your own soul. I wish you a journey filled with freedom, honesty, and sacredness. And whenever you forget who you are, come back and listen to this part again. To remember, you are light. You are truth. You are the reason a corner of this world shines brighter. I believe in you. I believe in the light you carry. And I will always pray that light is never extinguished.